This video brought to you by jadedpainting.com. If you need your miniatures painted to a tabletop standard, check out jadedpainting.com. Hey everyone, welcome back to this Dark Potential painting tutorial. My name is Jay, and today I'll be showing you how to paint this Petrov-Morales Corporation weapon specialist with a flame launcher. I continued on all the red areas with a highlight of Evil Sun's Scarlet, the first layer color associated with Mephiston Red from the Citadel range. For this highlight, I basically just did an edge highlight and focused on all the raised areas on the model and kept the recesses the really nice shaded Carroburg Crimson areas. For this highlight, I focused on all the red areas, including the gun, which I tried to develop a nice gradient in the barrel of the flame launcher, on all the belts and straps, the wiring on the gun, the discs on the belt, which I just chose a subset of the areas on the disc, and the tops of the chimneys and the center of the backpack for the flame launcher. As you can see, I tried to keep the areas that are in the shaded areas, such as the dark Carroburg Crimson areas, and just tried to highlight the areas in which my light source, being my lamp, was hitting. I then did a second highlight of all these areas with Wild Rider Red. I continued the gradient in the center of the flame launcher, so try to go from a dark red to a lighter red, almost an orange. Wild Rider Red is actually pretty close to it being a dark orange anyway. So for this one, I just tried to do a gradient on the wiring on the gun, a subset of the areas on the discs again, and only on the areas the light would touch on the chimneys, and I focused more towards the center of the goggles on the eyes. The goal is to create a nice, clean gradient. And then finally, at the very edge of a couple of the areas on the model, I did a 1-to-1 mix of Wild Rider Red and Flash Gets Yellow, producing a quasi-bright orange. For this, I just focused on the fuel line from the gun to the tank, the edge of the gun, and the flame part of the barrel. And we will soon tie these all together using a glaze. As I just mentioned, the next step was to use a bloodletter glaze, one of the new products from the Citadel range, and this glaze will tint everything down a little bit more and make it a little more dark red. So essentially what it does is it really helps you blend all these reds together and creates a really nice gradient of reds. Plus it will tone down the orange and Wild Rider Red to make them more realistic. I then started all the skin areas with a base coat of rat skin flesh. For the skin, I just focused on all the areas that weren't protected by the helmet, so you can see me painting between the areas of the helmet and behind it, which you can clearly see the ears and the head. I then did another highlight. I know normally I would do a shade, but I decided to go directly to the highlight before the shade. And I did a highlight of Bestigor Flesh, and for this highlight I just focused on all the areas itself. The first part was just to get a nice base color down. I then gave a shading to all these areas with Reikland Flesh Shade. This will get in all the crevices and give it a nice tint to give it a nice realistic skin tone appearance. Just remember to use only a little bit of flesh shade and go very light on it to get in the crevices so you don't produce too deep of a contrast. After the shade was dry, I highlighted all these areas with a quick overbrush with Bestigor Flesh. As you can see, I'm just focusing on the raised areas, leaving the flesh shade in the crevices. So this is a pretty quick step. And then I did one more highlight with Ungor Flesh. And again, just focusing on the most raised areas on the head, which are just the ears, the part along the face, and the top of the head. is just create a nice gradient of colors that will realistic skin tones on all the head. And with this step nearing completion, we can turn our attention to finishing up the guns, the metallics, and the rest of the model.